Like it's still hard facts 92.3 Nigeria info. Sam Oracle Chinedu here. The conversation we're about to hold is, as I always claim, an important one. And it sounds true every single time. But this particular one is subject to modifications that I've not completely understood. So I'm going to start the conversation with these words. When last I looked, that means the last time I checked, this was the case. If it's different when you look, that means between when I looked and when you looked, some things have been modified. Having said that, I need you to understand the context of the conversation we're about to hold. That things changed as time elapsed. We can't tell the extent of the change, but we can tell the time that elapsed. The last time we checked was on the 15th of December, 2025. And at that time, the Supreme Court affirmed the constitutional power of the president to declare a state of emergency in any state to prevent a breakdown of law and order or descent into chaos and anarchy. In a split decision of 6-1, the Apex Court upheld the president's authority under the Constitution to proclaim a state of emergency. The court further held that during such a period, the president, and this is the source of the countless controversy that trailed this judgment, may suspend elected officials provided any such suspension is for a limited duration. Now, if you have sense, you should be asking questions here. Like 3 or 4 questions should come out of that statement. Delivering the lead majority judgment, Justice Mohammed Idris held that Section 305 of the 1999 Constitution empowers the president to adopt extraordinary measures to restore normalcy where a state of emergency has been declared. You can also clearly tell, even though I have not mentioned yet, that this has everything to do with Rivers State. He noted that the provisions do not specify the exact nature of the extraordinary measure, thereby vesting the president with discretion on how to act in such circumstances. I've attempted to hold conversations around this judgment, and I say attempted because I think that I failed. I did not get to any point of cohesion, coherence, or understanding, but I started the conversation. As you can also tell, a microcosm of a conversation happened between Chief Dr. Festus Oguche and I. And well, I'm usually at the end where I just ask questions and listen for the answers. And if I don't get it, I vocalize my confusion and ask more questions. So if you feel that way, you're not alone. But to help bring clarity to the confusion, Chief Dr. Festus Oguche, legal expert, analyst, of course he is. He specializes in international law, advocacy, and all things attached, joins me live in the studio. Good day, Chief.
Thank you, Oracle. Thanks for inviting me.
It was a pleasure. How are you doing, sir?
It's all right, very okay. We look forward to Christmas just a couple of days ahead. And we've been deep in the celebration.
Yes, indeed. I like to say, and I maintain, that Christmas is not a day, it's a season.
Yes, it is. It is, actually.
And that's exactly where we are. All right. So, as you would imagine, anywhere I start is a good place to start. Supreme Court Section 305 of the Constitution. Of course, you heard what I read, and a large part of it you already understand. What legal principle guarded the interpretation that the Supreme Court gave?
Well, any decision of court must be grounded in principles or doctrines, particularly when the issues are constitutional in nature. The Supreme Court has its own derivatives of jurisdiction and judicial power, upon which it exercises whatever competence that it has on matters that are brought before it, either by way of appeals or by way of original jurisdiction of the court. By the way, the matter you're talking about was invoked pursuant to the original jurisdiction of the court. That is where it's a dispute between the federation and the states, or between the states and themselves. Along the line, I also noticed that the National Assembly is also a party, and which other one? And I was wondering whether that's the appropriate thing. But the decision was set on constitutional principles. What they think or what they assume are the principles of the Constitution and the doctrines that guide it. Those things that pertain to how the Constitution should be operated and how people should conceive it, and considering its sacredness, its sanctity, its importance as the organic instrument that guides every affair, the state of affairs of government, the state of affairs of the people, the state of affairs of the institutions of governance.
Okay. As should be the case. So, where is the source of the controversy? Because you know how Nigerians reacted to what they heard from the Supreme Court.
Yes.
One of the things mentioned, which I think was considered a source of it, which also kind of got me confused, extraordinary powers. Justice Muhammad Idris noted that the provision does not specify the exact nature of those extraordinary powers, thereby vesting the president with the discretion on how to act in such circumstances. In this circumstance, it led to the suspension of a governor.
There's no such circumstance that will lead to the suspension or removal or whatever of a governor in any way whatsoever. I don't think there's any constitutional principle that supports that, not just in our jurisprudence, but around the world. So it was something that jolted the whole globe. Every people alike, and I mean, there were conversations all around the world by jurists on the subject matter, on the correctness of that Supreme Court justice, that judgment. That was the initial judgment, the initial decision they delivered.
Yeah.
And there was so much backlash. Some of us were turning in our beds up till after midnight that day, conceiving how possible a Supreme Court of a country, the apex court, the one that's assigned with the notions of perfection, even though Justice Okudifo Puta has warned us that it does not amount to infallibility because it's supreme. They are not supreme because they are infallible.
Yeah.
They are subject to certain errors, subject to certain misdirections, certain mistakes. After all, they are human beings as well. But it's something that jolted everybody, that the president has the power to remove elected officials
For a limited time.
even for a limited time, even for a second. I think it's rather bizarre. I find it very difficult to reconcile myself with it. And I was already writing articles in that direction, which I wanted to send for publication. And I had to withhold what I was doing. I sent you a copy of the news report, and it was very, very clear as to what the Supreme Court wants to do. And I found it very difficult to reconcile, like I said myself, with it, because that is not the law. That is not the position of the law. That is not supported by the provisions of the Constitution. Until the next morning, we started hearing a different story altogether. They said Mr. Inebe, my colleague in Lagos, had put out something to the effect that the journalists committed a grave error.
Really?
A very grave error in publicizing the decision of the courts. Incidentally, some of us, up till about 10 minutes ago, or about 30 minutes ago, I had not set my eyes on that judgment. And I was just eager to see what its content is all about. But then Inebe has spoke, then Dr. Ruben Abati also wrote something in this day newspaper, and I was beginning to wonder how a Supreme Court judgment can turn overnight into something else. The original judgment itself is lacking in clarity and consistency, and we have a situation where somebody is saying that the judgment that was put out to us by members of the media, which were consistently placed on all platforms, has upturned. There's a voting phase. There's a different thing altogether. The Femi Falana was on national TV last night and spoke elaborately on it and anchored on the fact that people misinterpreted that judgment, so it misconstrued that judgment. And it just got me wondering how possible that can be. These are trying times for Nigeria, but it hasn't gotten to a situation where we begin to see distortions and inconsistencies in judicial pronouncements, particularly one that comes from the apex court, the Supreme Court of Nigeria.
Okay. The copy of the judgment you have, Chief Oguche, which you graciously sent to me, Is it the same one that was initially
It
released
wasn't.
by the media?
It wasn't the same one. It wasn't the judgment per se. It was the reports of the decision.
Okay.
An
Okay.
analysis of the decision.
Okay.
This is the first time the judgment is coming out.
Okay. The certified copy.
The true, certified true
Copy. Yeah.
But then the fundamental aspects of the one that was reported were not contained in the one that was just sent.
So,
And there are other aspects of it that makes it very, very implausible to believe that probably something has not happened, or maybe some water has not passed under the bridge.
so misconstruction, mistakes,
Misinterpretation,
modification, misinterpretation. There are lots of things you can think of
alteration.
that happen from reports to judgment.
Exactly.
That's which is why my introduction was important.
Yes.
When last I looked, what we had was a report that said the president could suspend an elected official.
Yes.
All right, we have just a little above a minute before the break, and I would like to squeeze this in. Let's imagine the River State situation did not happen. The president had extraordinary powers by Section 305. What is that defined by? That extraordinary power, what did it mean before the Rivers Emergency Rule?
Extraordinary power can mean anything. It can mean that he can remove the commissioner of police
Okay.
for Rivers State. It can alter the security architecture. It can bring modifications to the security apparatus of the state. He can deploy his troops. He can do anything he wants, but he cannot remove democratically elected persons. He doesn't have the power to do that. That is not something within the Constitution alone. It is something that is embedded deeply, and I'm very surprised that those who sent the originating summons to the court did not pose that as a question. You know, in international human rights law, conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which is also part of our laws, and by the coextensive correlation between the Constitution and the African Charter, you cannot say that it exists at par of one of superiority and inferiority. It's an international treaty, and it's bound. It's bound on all the states that are parties to it. So it's not just a constitutional question. So it's not looking at Section 305 and say there are extraordinary measures. There's no extraordinary measure that empowers or enables the president in a federation, no matter how warped our own structure and system is, to remove people that are duly elected by the people. That is an act of sovereignty. The people, they determine the sovereignty. Look at Chapter 2 on the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy. That's where the sovereignty lies, at the people. And they elect somebody. Who are you as president to come and remove the person they elected unilaterally? It is not done anywhere.
Okay.
It is not done. And we have a whole lot of cases. I mean, global cases, global decisions. You know, that ground is fact. And that's why there's a uniformity. There's uniformity in that principle, that you cannot do it either in Brazil. Show me where it is done. It is not done anywhere.
All right, we have to take that break now. When we return, we talk some more. Stay with us.